In knitting and crochet, in theory, all you need is yarn and your needles or hooks of choice. But we all know that's not the truth. There are a myriad of notions and tools that we use that help us in our fiber making life, but I'm not going to talk about those today. I'm going to talk about the notions I don't use. Some of these I had at one time, and frankly, I can't even find them now. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and find out about the notions that have no place in my notions bag. All right, as we jump into this, I do want to say that everything I'm going to talk about today is a matter of personal preference. So these are the things that I do not care for, but I'll also be sharing some of the things that I do like as an alternative. And down in the notions bag, down in the description box, you will find links to materials and resources that I think are useful from today's video. Some of these will have clearly marked affiliate links. So if you click on a link and you make a purchase, I might then earn a small commission, which helps support my channel. Also down in the description box, you will find timestamps to different parts of the video. If you want to skip around, if you're like, I really just want to see the bloopers, whatever it is, you can find down in the description box. First, I want to talk about the retractable cloth tape measure. Now, on the surface, this seems like a really handy thing to have in your notions bag. We're always needing to measure things when we're doing knitting and crochet. It's retractable, so it's really nice and compact, and you can use it to measure your work, your body parts. Like, what's not to love about a retractable tape measure? Well, I used to have a retractable tape measure. I'm sure there's still some floating around somewhere. Can't find them because I never use them anymore. I actually find retractable tape measures really annoying. That plastic case, it's kind of heavy. And so I find when it's time to measure a gauge swatch or my work, I just find the heaviness of that case that the tape measure is wound into to kind of be in the way and causes me problems, and I just don't love it. The other thing about cloth tape measures, and this is just true cloth tape measures in general, is that over time they will stretch out and they become less and less reliable. In fact, if you think your gauge swatches are always lying to you, you might need a new tape measure. The fact is, every once in a while, you have to replace that retractable cloth tape measure. How often that is going to kind of depend on how often you use it. But, you know, if you're using that cloth tape measure on the regular basis, you're probably going to want to replace it about every year. So if I don't use a retractable cloth tape measure, what do I have in my notions bag? Well, one, I have this type of tape measure. This is a cloth tape measure. This will stretch out over time as well, but it's way less expensive. Now, it's not a huge difference in cost, but it's nice to save your pennies where you can. And I really only use this if I am measuring body parts, or if maybe I have a project that's in the round and I kind of need to measure the full circumference of it, then I might pull out this tape measure. But it doesn't get used a whole lot in my knitting life, I'll be honest. But when I do need it, this does everything a retractable tape measure does without the heavy case. But my favorite thing to have in my notions bag is this. This is my 6-inch Quilters acrylic ruler. I love this. I love having this on the regular. It's just like, it's 6 inches. It fits into my notions bag perfectly. When I want to measure my gauge swatch, I have the perfect like 4 to 6 inches that I need. And my favorite thing about this is that it's a quilter's ruler, which means that the 0 mark on the ruler is right here on the edge. So yeah, I love having this ruler in my bag. Something I really like to use actually when I'm blocking and I'm measuring things out to make sure all my edges are nice and even is actually a metal retractable tape measure. That I really like to have when I am blocking, because that metal tape measure, you can measure it out and it's gonna stay still. It's gonna stay still, it's gonna stay laid out, it's never gonna be stretched out. So I really like also having a metal retractable tape measure. All sorts of different measuring tools that I can utilize, but yeah, the retractable cloth tape measure, it's just not for me. If you have followed me for any amount of time, you know I'm very particular about stitch markers. I have surprisingly strong opinions about what stitch markers I use. Like, my favorite stitch marker is actually probably just scrap yarn. But the stitch marker that I cannot stand, that I just see no need to have in my life at all, are ring stitch markers. I used to have a bunch. I have taken them out of my Notion tins where I keep all my stitch markers, and I have banished them from my life because they're just not very versatile. Ring stitch markers are great to put on your needle, and that's about it. But there's plenty of stitch markers that are just more versatile. I have an assortment that I really enjoy. Here you can see them. I love these. This is a coilless stitch marker. I've seen it called a pear stitch marker. I've seen it called a bell-shaped stitch marker. They're great when you're working with small yarn like sock projects. These, for me, get used quite a bit. Also, I love these. These are my locking stitch markers. What I love about locking stitch markers and these coilless stitch markers is you can put these on a stitch itself because it locks. But if for some reason I wanted stitch markers on my needles, like I can close this locking stitch marker and it works just the same as a ring stitch marker. And then the other kind that I really like are these. I've only found this style of stitch marker at Michael's, but I really like them because you just can kind of pop them open like this. Like you just need one finger and you can doop, doop. It's really great. It can also act as a ring stitch marker. I just really like these. So yeah, those are the stitch markers that I like. As I said, I have very strong opinions on my stitch markers. It's like stitch markers is something I use a lot in my knitting and crochet life because I really use these to track my progress. And if there's a mistake that I've made or I've dropped a stitch, like you just always need locking stitch markers. Ring stitch markers, I can't do half of what I can do with these stitch markers. Ring stitch markers have one purpose, and that's to go in your knitting needle. And they're not great for crochet. Like, I don't even know what you would use those for in crochet. If you're a crocheter and you like ring stitch markers, I'd love to know how you use them. Row counters. I don't use them. Don't use row counters. I used to have a row counter like this one. Actually, that might be the one. That is definitely the one that I had. I somewhere in my home, I still have this somewhere. At some point, I gave it to my daughter to play with when she was like a toddler because she liked the clicky sound. But for my knitting, and crochet, I stopped using those a long time ago. The problem for me with row counters is I just don't, when I have a project, just forget to use them. I'll like do row after row after row, and then we're like, oh, I never progressed my clickety row counter. And how many rows have I gone? And I'm counting my rows, and you know, I just came to realize at some point that I was better off using stitch markers to mark my progress as opposed to using a row counter. The other thing I never really liked about row counters is you can only use your row counter for one project at a time. I often have many projects going on at a time, which means I either need row counters for every single whip in my stack of whips, which is formidable. The way that I like to keep track of my work is with stitch markers. So either with some scrap yarn or with my locking stitch markers, after every pattern repeat or every 10, 20 rows, whatever makes sense, I'll just use a stitch marker to mark my progress. And reading my work. Reading my work is a really great way for me to keep track of where I am in a project. If a stitch marker falls off, if I lost a row counter, I can always look at my work and read it and see where I am. And that is just the most reliable way of being able to track your work, is to actually be able to read it. Let me know if you want me to do a video on like maybe some of my top tips or important things to know in order to read your knitting. I'd love to do that video if you are interested in it. Let me know down in the comments below. If there's one thing I want to talk about today that I really look at and like kind of regret buying, it is these sock blockers. Yeah, sock blockers are meant to help you block your socks. But the truth is they're 99% of the time not necessary. And I would say a good chunk of the time actually do more damage to your sock than help them out. Whenever you block a project, like really block a project, there's a certain amount of stretching involved. The thing with socks is at the top of a sock, you're gonna have your cuff. That cuff is normally going to be ribbing with negative ease. And negative ease is just like the percentage of draw in that you want so that the cuff of the sock will cling to your leg and they don't just, you know, slouch down. But over time, ribbing can get stretched out from overuse. And what sock blockers do, because the sock just fits right onto the blocker, is you have that ribbing and it gets stretched out by the blocker. And that means that its negative ease kind of gets taken away and you lose some of the elasticity of the ribbing that you want in order for it to cling to your leg. So sock blockers aren't great for ribbing. That's what it comes down to. You're better off normally with socks to, when you finish knitting a pair, wash them and then just shape them with your hands. You know, if there's an area of the sock that you want to stretch out a little bit, just stretch out with your hand and then lay it out flat to dry and you're going to be good. Maybe if you had socks that had a particularly lacy pattern, maybe you would use a sock blocker to open that up, but I don't think so. I think what sock blockers are really good for is they really should be called sock displayers because that's what a sock, these are really good at. If you want to photograph your socks, these then become handy. Like you can put your sock on it and it's all nice and stretched out and you can see all the beautiful work and they're really nice for photography. But that's kind of it. I can't think of the last time I used these to actually block my socks. I think these are great for display. So what is a yarn bowl if you don't know? A yarn bowl, it's a bowl that usually has some kind of slit in it that you can put on the ground and put your yarn in the bowl and then you put the yarn through the hole or the slit and that helps tension your yarn so that you have better, more even tension while you're knitting. And what people love about yarn bowls is that the yarn is sitting in the bowl on the ground and not rolling around all over your floor, collecting dust and what have you. And I guess for that purpose, it's fine. So why do I like sit there and go, I don't want a yarn bowl, or I never use my yarn bowl? I have a lot of whips. And in terms of storage, it's just, I don't know, I just find them unnecessary. This is my yarn bowl right now. It's a shoebox. Admittedly, it's not as attractive as yarn bowls that you will find, but it's free. I really like it because I can store my whole project in it and apparently a cell phone holder. I don't know why that's in there. In fact, I have a couple of projects in here. I got my socks in here and my yarn is in here. It's nice and protected from any dust that I might have. If I have extra needles or something I need for a project, it can all go in my box. And when I'm not using it, I just close the box and I can store it away. If I wanted to make this pretty, I could do a little decoupage on it. But I just find that this serves me much, much better than a yarn bowl does. It's storage, it keeps my yarn from rolling under the couch, it does everything a yarn bowl does, plus more, and it came with shoes that I bought. So basically free. If I want some kind of tensioning device on it, I can just use a paper clip or a binder clip or something like that. And hey, guess what? I'm doing something that is just as good, does everything functionally that a yarn bowl does. But it's also storage. And I think that might be my issue with a yarn bowl, is yarn bowls aren't great for storage. They kind of take up a lot of space. And you know, if space is at a premium for you in your life, yarn bowls are kind of cluttery. I have to admit, there are some yarn bowls that I see out there on Etsy and the various marketplaces that are very like artisanal and everything, and they're so pretty, and I'm like, ooh, it's so pretty. And I think there's real value. There can be real value in having aesthetically pleasing tools that you're working with. Like, it just makes the experience even nicer when you have a pretty tool. And I feel like that's yarn bowls. But for me, yarn bowls would just be sitting on a shelf looking pretty. For me, it's just kind of cluttery and tends to collect dust. And I want things not collecting dust in my home. I've got enough stuff collecting dust. I don't need yarn bowls collecting dust. But I know there are some people who are very passionate about their yarn bowls and they really love them. This is definitely one of those things that's a personal preference. But yeah, if you say, Carrie, you have to choose a yarn bowl or a shoebox, obviously I'm going to choose the shoebox. So there are some, at least some, but those are probably like the major notions and tools that I do not use. And especially knowing as much as I know now, I would not spend money on. Like, no thank you. But again, this is very much a matter of personal preference. So I would love to hear from you down in the comments. Are the things I've talked about today, are these notions that you love and you will defend the use of? Or do you agree with me? You're like, yeah, Carrie, I agree. Yarn bowls, not necessary in my life. Or what are some notions that maybe I didn't talk about that you think are like, nope, don't need that in my notions bag? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments below. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If so, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your other fiber making friends. Liking videos, sharing videos, commenting on videos are all ways that help my channel with the YouTube algorithm so more people are able to discover this space and we can grow this community together. So thank you so much. Thank you so much if you do any of those things, or if you take things a step further and you leave me a super thanks or buy me a coffee or use one of my affiliate links down in the description box. Thank you so much. It is so greatly appreciated. Of course, the biggest way, and it's totally free, that you can support my channel is to hit subscribe and the notification bell. Clicking on the notification bell, if you have your notifications turned on, will let you know whenever I upload a new video or start a live stream. Thank you again for joining me today. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy making. Bye. In knitting and crochet, in theory, all you need is yarn and needles or hooks, depending on whether you're doing crochet or knitting or, you know, try that again. Who knew you could be so passionate about stitch markers? I am very passionate about my stitch markers. That's a lot of notions. That's a lot of no notions. We're gonna talk about the no notions today. We're not gonna talk about the yes notions today. We're gonna talk about the no notions today. Not the yes notions, the no notions. Because I've got some no notions that are not in my notions bag. I feel like there's a song. I feel like there's a song like about notions. Like, no, I've got a notion. I got a feeling that tonight's gonna be a good night. But that's not the song, and I'm not singing well.